And now for something completely different.
Hi, my name is Annie Grossman, and I'm a dog trainer. This podcast is brought to you by School for the Dogs, a Manhattan-based facility I own and operate along with some of the city's finest dog trainers. During this podcast, we'll be answering your questions, geeking out on animal behavior, discussing pet trends, and interviewing industry experts. Welcome to School for the Dogs podcast. This week, School for the Dogs podcast is sponsored by SaneBox, the email service that is designed to make dealing with email a breeze. SaneBox gives you a powerful set of tools that can work in just about any email client. It's kind of like artificial intelligence for your inbox. SaneBox will automatically sort your email for you, defer your email to a more convenient time, set up reminders, and more. Get a 2-week free trial, plus $15 off when you sign up at schoolforthedogs.com/sane.
Now I wish I could shimmy like my sister Kate. She shakes like a jelly on a plate. Mama wanted to know last night, why all the boys treat Kate so nice. Well, all the boys in the neighborhood, they know she can shake it and it's understood. I may be late, but I'll be up to date when I can shimmy like my sister Kate. Oh, mercy, shimmy like my sister Kate.
So, I'm sitting here with, what do I even call you?
Partner in crime?
My partner in crime. My partner not in a sexual way.
Yes, I always worry about that when I say, introduce you as my partner. I clarify it with business partner?
My business partner, she with whom I founded School for the Dogs. Kate Senisi, the one, the only. And Kate has certainly been one of the most important people in my life in the last...
Oh, thank you.
In the last decade.
And you and mine.
Aw.
I think we're also friends.
I think. Kate,
just kidding.
Do you want to be friends? Should we be friends?
I don't know. It might interfere with our working relationship. Is it possible?
No, I really feel so lucky that we found each other when we did. And so I brought Kate on to talk about how she got into dog training and to talk about some of the things that we both love about dog training. I think one thing, among many things that we both have in common, is we both get really excited about geeking out on on training. And I knew early on that we were going to be friends for a long time when we were curled up, I think, on your couch drinking wine, watching like Kathy Sdao.
Oh, yeah, the Tosser days.
Recorded videos of DVDs of seminars on Saturday nights together after dog training all weekend, or figuring out how to become dog trainers all weekend. We would hang out and watch videos about dog training with our dogs. And I remember one of those nights thinking, like, this is it. I have found a certain kind of soulmate.
I found an equal nerd.
An equal nerd.
Partner.
So Kate and I started working together, pretty soon after we first met, which I believe was in 2011.
I think so.
And at that point, we were both, we had studied dog training on our own in different ways, which we can talk about in a minute. And I think we were both at the point of trying to figure out how to parlay our interest and knowledge into work. And School for the Dogs kind of was born from there. But why don't you talk about how you got to that point? Till that point when we first met at Irving Farm.
Yes.
Our favorite
local coffee place.
Our favorite local coffee place.
So I think my obsession with behavior may have started much younger than I previously thought. Recently, I've been watching this show, Criminal Minds, which I'm sure everyone's heard of. And it's actually pretty terrible. But what I love about it is the behavioral profiling.
Criminal Minds?
Yeah.
I thought it was called Mindhunter.
No, there's different
two different shows?
Yeah. Mindhunter is actually based on a book that I read probably back in like 1995 when I was like 13 years old. And I got really excited actually about studying behavior in humans, specifically serial killers, people that do things that are disturbing. And my goal at 13 was to work for the FBI and to be a behavioral profiler.
Amazing.
But then once I looked into it...
See, what's funny is I feel like if I had known about that too, that also would have been what I would have wanted to do.
Yeah. But then the more I read about it...
Or maybe become a serial
killer. And then I could study your behavior.
We would have met one way or
yeah. But I mean, and it is still fascinating to me, but there's an element of that is a lot harder to sort of like not bring home with you. Although sometimes some of the work that I do with dogs is also, it's difficult in some cases where a dog may have severe behavioral issues. But not to the level of...
Just to jump around in time a little bit in this story. Those who don't know you, who might be listening, don't know that you now specialize with difficult dogs.
Yes.
To some
extent.
Sort
of the serial killers of the dog world.
The serial
in some cases.
Of the dog world. Well, I mean, one of the kind of amazing things I think about our partnership is that we naturally found this division of labor as far as running the business together, which we can maybe talk about, but also a division of what we're both interested in, and I think that's really suited both of us. And
and it really...
I like to tell people that you do all the hard stuff and I do all the fun stuff, but you actually find the hard stuff fun. So.
Yeah, and it also I think helps us cover like a wider range of issues as a partnership and as a group of trainers. I really love it. I wouldn't want to work any other way. I know there are a lot of trainers out there that run their own businesses, and I'm sure that's stressful, but also easier in a way because you only have to deal with yourself. But the collaboration and having that group, I think, is really, really important, especially on the days where you have a tough case or a tough situation. You have people to talk to about it.
Yeah. And I think, I'm not sure how to say this, but the thing is that people might not realize is that whether you're working with a puppy or you're working with, let's call it a sidewalk psycho, a dog who has real issues, for instance, maybe on the street or whatever, or a dog who just has like mental issues, which sometimes just can happen like it does with people. You can do everything right. But in either case, like you're using the same building blocks as far as training goes.
Definitely.
It's not like, hold on, stop everything. I need to work with a totally different set of tools. It's the same tools. You're just using them in a not a more way, just a different way.
Or you're wearing your glasses, your puppy glasses, or your disturbed dog glasses. Like a little bit of a filter there. As to how you would
approach something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's like kind of like cooking meals in the kitchen. Like the kitchen doesn't change.
You were always the queen of analogies. Yes. So
I figure 1 out of every 5 of them will stick.
So just going back, that was early history. And I actually I guess I was interested in animals, but more interested in strange human behavior at an earlier age. And then I was interested in having a pet. My parents wouldn't allow me to have any furry animals. So I had a snail as my first pet, which then had babies, and I brought it back to the pond because I felt so guilty.
Oh my gosh.
And then...
Poor snail.
And
did
after
the snail
that...
But you provided a home for the snail.
I did. And if I had known...
You were a foster
what
mom.
I know now, I may have even tried to communicate with that snail.
Did the snail have a name?
Huh? Yes, Victoria. Because I was victorious in getting my first pet.
Aww. Victoria the snail.
Yes. I mean, I figured that... Actually, I was lucky because it ended up, I guess, being female because it had laid eggs. But I named it that before I knew the sex of the snail.
So you had a pet snail.
So, yes. And then I had reptiles, iguanas. I learned a lot from them. And then fast forward to my professional life. I went to school for graphic design. Didn't really know what else I wanted to do, but I thought
why
that
didn't
seemed
you
fun.
want to go into behavioral psychology
I
or
guess
profiling?
I changed my mind about that. So there were a couple reasons. One was that you have to actually be an agent with the FBI for like 10 years before you can even be considered for that behavioral unit. Although maybe that's changed. I think those were the rules back when I actually looked into it. And I wasn't sure if I actually wanted to be an agent in the field. I just wanted to study serial killers, interview them, and sort of work on that profiling team. So that was one thing. And then I also just thought about my future and having a family, and just, you know, the things that you would read about would be hard even for me to think about, like bringing up with a family member. There's just so much evil out there, so many things that are mentally disturbing. I thought, like, how am I going to come home and talk about this to, like, maybe a husband or kids? Although I don't have any children now. So maybe I could have done it. But something about it was just too hard for me to feel like I could compartmentalize that and not bring it home with me. Whereas with dog training, even though, again, sometimes the cases are tough, it doesn't feel as...
well, you're not worried someone's going to come after your children in the night.
Yeah, it's a little less personal, I guess, even though they are species that live with us.
When I was trying to figure out a new career when I was 30, and I talked about this, I think, in the first episode of the podcast, but sitting in the dog park writing notes to myself of, like, what are things that I like to do? What do I want to do? I think really the three top things that I thought about as careers for myself, dog training was one. Becoming a makeup artist was another.
Really?
Which I actually, and I actually recently talked to a makeup artist who told me that I did look into it at the time because I used to do face painting at...
I
Do
didn't
you know this
that.
about
No.
me? I used to do face painting at kids' birthday parties throughout college.
I can see that.
I
You're
made
a great illustrator.
I made a pretty
It's like
penny.
illustrating on the face.
Yeah, I loved doing it. It was really fun. I mean, I didn't really know what I was doing, but I was teaching myself. And this was kind of like before there was the internet, so I didn't have a lot of references. But I liked doing it, and I thought maybe I could do like stage makeup or something. And I looked into it a little bit at the time, but there was no program that seemed like it made sense.
There were no
anyway.
face painting programs?
Well, I wasn't going to do face painting. I was going to do,
Makeup
theatrical,
artistry,
something. But anyway, I met this one the other day who told me that she went to makeup school and learned a lot, and it was $30,000 for 6 months,
Wow.
which I thought...
And that was recently or
recently,
like back when
recently,
you...
no.
Okay.
And I thought, gosh, dog training school was certainly more affordable.
A little bit.
But my third choice of like new careers for myself, if I could figure out how to do it, was private eye.
Really?
Yeah, I loved the idea.
Have you seen that show Bored to Death?
Yes.
It's one of my favorite shows. I'm so sad they just
I love
canceled
that
it.
too.
But yeah, that's the first thing I think of when I think of a private eye. You'd be that like hipster private eye.
Hipster private eye.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think there's something in
It's a little bit voyeuristic too, kind of watching other people. But it's
so
observation.
is journalism, which is what I
Yeah.
was doing before, talking to people, finding out their story, finding out what motivates them, finding out and just figuring things out. Like I think I like just figuring things out, and there is an element of that kind of detective work, I think, actually in dog training that certainly scratches that itch.
Totally.
Like I had this one case, it was just pretty early on, where the dog only would walk with the man and not the woman. Mm-hmm. And it took 2 or 3 sessions, but I finally realized that they were walking the dog with different leashes, and that the woman was walking with this leash that had a really big clasp and was like banging the dog on the face.
And the dog was probably small, right?
A small dog,
And it was,
yeah. And so the clasp was like banging the dog on the face when they were walking outside, whereas the man used a leash with a lightweight clasp, and that made all the difference.
Yeah, sometimes it's something as simple as that.
Yeah.
If only it were that every time, but...
Or I just got... do you remember Gus, the French bulldog? Oh,
I don't think so.
I just got an email from his humans, who I saw at the Hester Street Fair that we did a few weeks ago. And she was telling me that he started peeing in the house after the baby was born. They just had a baby. I think... maybe it wasn't after the baby was born, but now that the baby's older, walking around, they were pretty sure it was pegged to the baby. Mm-hmm. And I said, try switching up his food. Maybe it'll help. And they just wrote me that they said it made a huge difference. So
Wow.
that made me feel good. But again,
Validated.
it's that feeling of like, oh, I solved the puzzle, right?
Yeah.
Which we all like that feeling. Anyway,
Definitely.
back in time.
Okay, back in time.
Young Kate Senisi from Schenectady, New York, goes to college, becomes a graphic designer.
Yes,
And
did that for several years, actually, making a decent living. It's still not something I dislike, but
well, you do for those who don't know, Kate does all the design for School for the Dogs, and she's created all of our website. She's the reason why everything looks as good as it does.
Well, thank you.
Which is a kind of person training. Right?
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess my training in branding and graphic design really actually did help me out in the end.
Seriously?
Yeah. So, and again, it wasn't a job I disliked. It was just sitting at a computer all day for 8 hours. The last firm actually I worked for, I really loved, still do love, an environmental design firm. So it was pretty much like the dream graphic design job I could have had. But I just felt like I wasn't being
You still have a lot of friends from there too, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Shout out to Atelier 10 if you're listening. So I got really interested in doing something different, and I don't remember making a list, but I do remember at one point thinking, I think I want to do something more with animals, specifically dogs, and then I sort of started thinking, what could I do professionally? And I started off actually doing some dog walking for a year or two, and then I was a doggy daycare handler, and all of those things were interesting, but not very fulfilling. I was doing them part-time, and I just felt like I couldn't really make much of a difference in the dog's overall behavior. So that's what led me to become interested in training. And then that was back when Tauser was big, so I used to read a lot, go to a lot of conferences, watch a lot of Tauser videos. And I don't
Can you
actually
explain what
Tauser. So Tauser is basically like Netflix for the dog training community. Although now I think everything's online, right? You know.
Yeah, I believe it's all streaming now. It's a really, really great resource. If you're into dog training, you gotta get on Tauser. They have recorded lectures and classes, and I love it. Love it. So I wanted to chat for a quick moment about someone who you and I have discussed many times, and that is Cesar Millan, the dog whisperer. This has happened to me, so I'm guessing it's happened to you. I bet sometimes when you introduce yourself as a dog trainer, people say, oh, like the dog whisperer?
Yes, that has happened.
Now,
That's happened many times.
Our dear listeners might not know, but we're not big fans of the dog whisperer, Cesar Millan.
Yeah, and maybe not even for the reasons that most people would guess. I mean, there are two
A lot of people who don't know about dog training, I think, would just think it's jealousy.
Yeah, possibly.
Like we're jealous of his
success. Yeah.
Which I guess I am to some extent, but not like I want to be him.
No, I wish that someone else maybe could have gained that much popularity, but actually getting like the correct information out there, that would have really improved. I think that would have improved.
Well, we both encountered the dog whisperer before we got into dog training. I think you were a little bit more of a devotee early on than I was.
I tried some of those methods with a foster dog way back when, and just leash corrections. And I saw actually her behavior decline in the next couple of days.
How would you describe
what
a leash correction
is basically a sharp pop to the leash if the dog, let's say, looks at another dog and growls, or starts pulling on the leash, right? So it would be considered positive punishment, although I don't know that we're going to quite get into the quadrants today. But adding in something that the dog or the animal doesn't like to make sure, or to attempt to decrease the probability of that behavior happening.
Well, what was your first step though in becoming a dog trainer then, besides watching Cesar Millan?
Oh, well, getting into dog walking and being a daycare handler, I guess.
And then from there, reading, watching videos. I don't actually have a formal education, which people might be shocked to know. I didn't do. I did apprentice with 2 trainers in Brooklyn, but not for more than probably 6 months. Well, I think it's interesting to note because I think it's something that is true about this profession. There's not one path to take.
Yeah.
Every single person who works at School for the Dogs has a different route. No?
I'm remembering something now, which is my volunteering at Animal Haven in the ASPCA. That might have actually been the first thing before I did dog walking, now that I think about it.
So do you feel like you've learned mostly on the job?
Yeah, I think I've learned, I feel like I've also learned a lot from observing the trainers that I apprenticed with. Mostly that, I was already on the right track, and it gave me confidence to feel like I could be doing this as a job and getting paid.
So when you reached out to me, right, when we first met?
Yeah, so I think when we first met, I think I was teaching at Petco part-time, right, and working at Atelier 10, the other part-time, which is the environmental design firm. And I was trying to figure out, is it possible to sustain, like, you know, a yearly salary doing dog training? Could I make it? Or am I just going to have to be, like, kind of one foot in each profession for a while? Because at my design job, I had a salary, I had health insurance, all the things that adults usually think they need. So, yeah, at that point, I think I was just looking for some way to be able to do that full time.
And you found the
CPDT or APDT,
the Association for Professional Dog Trainers
trainer meetup, and that's where I met you.
And was that through the APDT site then?
I think it was through their website, yeah.
Because I think that must have been, I think I went to the APDT conference in 2010 in Atlanta, because that was like a big wake-up moment for me as far as like...
Yeah. Oh, I remember it was a great one for me early on, too.
I think conferences are so much fun, but I think they're especially useful when you're at that point and trying to figure out whether you want to do something. Yes. I imagine, like, whatever it is you want to do, if you can find, like, a conference to go to and just immerse yourself.
Yeah, for, like, 8 hours a day. It's
with, like,
fantastic.
Lots of other people who are doing that thing and who have opinions on it, and it seems so valuable to me.
And experience.
Yeah. I mean, it's stuff that you can't get online.
No, and I don't know that you can get that in any, like, condensed, I guess, in any apprenticeship even either.
Yeah, I think.
Although ours is pretty good.
Yeah. APD, going to that, I've been to a lot of conferences, and I think I've gotten a lot out of all of them, but that one in particular felt really important.
Life-changing.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah.
So I guess that's why I was then on the APDT meetup group or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, I remember you contacted me. I think I remember you contacted me, and then I looked at your website, and you had, like, the pink hair at the time.
Oh, yeah.
And you had photos of you working with disco, and your website was super well designed, and I had a total, like, crush on you. I had a friend crush on you before we even met.
The truth comes out.
Yeah. Well, it was like friend crush plus like jealousy of, like, she's making it as a dog trainer and I'm not.
Oh, but I wasn't. The secret's out.
Yeah, but your website was convincing.
Made it look... Oh, well, I also fostered a ton of dogs. See, this is how my memory works. Like, the floodgates have opened. I also we must have fostered like 12 dogs over the years. Mm-hmm. Jared, my now husband, and I. And I actually, of course, learned a lot from having multiple dogs in my home at the same time. So yeah, then we met in 2011, and you did continue at Atelier 10 for about 2 years. And doing the part-time thing.
Yeah.
And then one day, Annie, being the risk taker that she is, said, let's just do it.
Let's do it.
And I don't know what I was thinking, but I said yes.
I think I actually wrote out things on paper. And it was like, if you
that
can
would
work
convince me.
this many hours and get paid this much, then you could afford to quit your job.
Yeah.
Well, I remember kind of, like, proposing to you and saying, like, like, would you be my business partner kind of thing? Because I think I felt like, I definitely felt like I didn't know how to become a dog trainer. I did not know, like, what the first steps were to take, and that I needed like a buddy.
Yeah.
And I also felt like we had complementary talents, that you had the design stuff, you had the organization stuff.
I had other
creativity. Other stuff.
Most of the creative ideas to date have probably come from Annie.
Well, and then we set up. Anyway, I remember just having this feeling of, like, maybe if we approach this together, because it felt so hard by myself. Like, I felt just paralyzed. Like, I don't know
what to do next.
I don't know what to do next.
How to start even.
Like, I don't know. I wasn't sure how I could do a lesson even. Like, every little bit of it felt daunting, and I didn't feel like anybody was... There was no school for the dogs that I felt like I could go to and hang out and meet people and watch things in New York City. I felt like it wasn't... nobody had big open arms
Yeah, well, and also what's different, there are a lot of things.
I didn't have enough experience really, I feel like, to get a job for someone else. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I think a lot of, I know a lot of trainers in New York City don't have physical locations. And I think that's one thing that has really worked to our benefit, is to actually have a physical location and of course, our membership. There's so many things.
Well,
to have our members, to have that community there. And I don't think you can do that without a physical location.
It's so funny
it's not
because...
the same.
Yeah. Well, we started, as you and I know, but listeners might not, in my living room. The room that we're sitting in right now, actually.
Which looks much different.
It looks so much different. God. It's crazy when I think about it. So I have a large for New York City, floor-through apartment, and that has been in my family for a very long time. And we turned the living room into a training studio. We put rubber on the floors, and there were like bulletin boards on the wall.
I
and
still have some pictures of that.
Shelves of dog toys. And we'll have to dig up some photos. But I don't remember the moment where we decided to do that. And I do think it probably was my crazy idea.
I would bet it was.
But in looking back, it seems like it was like such an out of the box way to do things in a weird way, but I mean in a good way, but also
because most trainers rent space for classes and they teach in the homes, and that's pretty much all they do because they don't have a physical location.
But it made such a difference. I mean, I can't talk for you, but for me, mentally, building a business, having a physical space somehow made all the difference. Like the way that, like, being able to promote, like, even though we were still going to clients' homes too, having clients come here and work here and having a place to have playtimes and classes and stuff, like having a location where we could keep our stuff and not have to bring it every time we come and not have to be in a daycare with dogs in the other room. And like somehow it just made things click into place. And I feel like, like you said, I feel like that's kind of like buoyed us along the way the whole time.
Definitely. I agree.
But there was a short period where we were teaching at the dog daycare. So after about maybe a year and a half or 2 years into running classes out of my former living room, there was a really big fire, and which is when we moved into our current space. But there was a period of time between when we had to leave because of the fire and when we moved into our current space where we were at a dog daycare, and those were hard days.
They weren't that hard, but
I think I reacted. I mean, partially also like
your home was gone.
Yeah, so I lost my home and workplace in a fire, so that was certainly part of probably the lull in my general mood at the time was because it really was a hard time. But I found it really difficult to work out of the dog daycare. Just like my senses were.
For me, it wasn't that bad because the first place I started teaching was Upper East Side Petco. And the training space was like this little
tiny
X10
thing
with like 4 students. So I got really good, really fast at space management there.
I recently did an episode with our trainer, Anna Marie, where we were talking about classical conditioning, which I know is one of her favorite subjects, one of my favorite subjects. I think one of your favorite subjects. I think good dog training. If you're a good dog trainer, you have to be really excited about classical conditioning. We didn't get a chance to talk about the other kind of learning, which is operant conditioning. And operant conditioning is really what's interesting actually is classical conditioning is operant conditioning. Actually, all conditioning is operant conditioning. It's just you're focusing on the behavior when you are making use of operant conditioning. There's some sort of criteria for the behavior, whereas with classical conditioning, the criteria is 0. You're not looking
criteria
for any
is
specific
The
behavior.
thing is there if you're doing like classical conditioning.
Right. Is
or
is
counter-conditioning.
is the animal existing?
Yeah.
Is the only question that you're asking. Whereas with operant conditioning, you're starting to ask like, is the
select for some behaviors
specific
or
behavior.
ask for some behaviors.
right? That's how I think of the difference in some way is or one of the differences between operant conditioning and classical conditioning. Punishment. You started talking a little bit about punishment, but just to define it for those who are not as nerdy about this as you and I are, punishment is not some bad, big, dirty thing. Punishment, by technical definition, is anything that's discouraging a behavior. And reinforcement is simply the opposite, anything that's encouraging a behavior. And when we talk about positive punishment or negative punishment, or positive reinforcement or negative punishment, or sorry, negative reinforcement, we're using the words positive and negative in terms of addition and subtraction. So
Instead of good or bad.
Right? And so I think you used the term positive punishment before. Positive punishment means you're adding something to the equation in order to discourage
or decrease a behavior.
And you, I know, use very little punishment, and even in the cases of even in very difficult cases, you don't use punishment. But it's not because punishment is strictly bad, right?
Well,
I mean, what are some of the reasons why? How do you explain to someone who says, my dog is behaving a way I don't like, therefore I'm going to punish it? That seems like it makes sense. How do you explain that away?
Right. Well, the first question would be, why is the dog behaving this way? So if it's a case of, let's say, dog reactivity or stranger danger, meaning a dog is, let's say, barking at someone to get them to go away, I want the client to understand why the dog is barking. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. I feel like I just forgot the question, actually.
Well, how do you explain to somebody that we're going to approach this problem without using punishment and you know, with it being it's not because we're like touchy-feely happy people and we only believe in using positive reinforcement, punishment's bad. It's because we're not going to use punishment because there are actual problems, secondary problems that can occur.
Right. Well, so in addition to the side effects that punishment can cause, one which would be increased anxiety in an animal, increased stress levels.
Well, hold on, pause.
Yeah.
What's interesting is these problems are caused through the associations.
Right.
Which is
so
the
it all
classical
boils down
conditioning.
to classical conditioning. So is the learner having a good time? Is the learner comfortable? If stress is affecting that equation at all, why would you ever consider adding in positive punishment? The learner is already so stressed.
Or even add any criteria at all.
Yeah, or even start with operant conditioning at that point, right?
Right, like because if you have an animal that is stressed out, which most aggressive dogs are, right? Because aggression generally stems from fear.
Stress or arousal.
Yeah.
I always hesitate to use the word fear only because I don't actually know what the animal is thinking.
Good point.
But whereas a term like stress, we have definitions for what that looks like, body language-wise, exactly, and arousal as well.
Good point. But if you're dealing with any animal who is in any state other than, you know, like basically okay and happy,
comfortable,
like that's not an animal who's going to be doing good learning.
Right.
So you want to first work on creating, like, putting them in a better mental state.
Yeah. So step one is if I have a stressed out dog, we've got to figure out if we do want to actually teach the dog anything, how do we get them into that state of mind? And that's just what you said. We've got to somehow change the emotional groundwork, whether it's overall in the dog's life, just when they're outside, just when they're around XYZ. So starting to change that groundwork is really just trying to change the association using classical conditioning.
So what does that look like?
So that would depend on the particular dog, but
well, why
in
don't
general,
you think of an example of a dog that you've worked with recently?
Yeah. So when I can also think of the Sidewalk Psychos. So one of the classes I teach is called Sidewalk Psychos, and it's designed for dogs who are very uncomfortable or very agitated or a mix of both around in the presence of other dogs, specifically on leash. Some of them actually do a little bit better off leash. And the majority of the class is centered around classical conditioning, but when the dogs are ready, we start working on operant and actually teaching behaviors like focusing on the handler, walking nicely on the leash, impulse control exercises, waiting at doors, and things like that. So to start in that class, we set up barriers so that the dogs actually can't see each other, and we've got calming music on. I spray down the barriers with what is that called again? Rescue? No, what's this?
Rescue remedy?
Yeah, with Rescue, which supposedly has some anti.
Is that different from Rescue remedy?
Has some calming properties. Yeah, it is different. And basically, to help the dogs come in and relax, the owners practice a couple of relaxation techniques at home, where the dog is very comfortable, and they associate the relaxation techniques with the mat, hopefully, which they then bring to class, and then they come in, and the first, maybe 15 or 20 minutes of that class is just making sure everyone's feeling good. Mm-hmm. So that could be done through massage, it could be done through food, a mix of both.
In puppy kindergarten, I say this entire series of classes is all about your dog feeling good in here.
Yeah, so classical conditioning is basically the beginning of a dog learning to feel good in the presence of other dogs. And slowly, once the dogs are feeling comfortable, but not until then, we start exposing them to seeing another dog when they're feeling relaxed, though. That's the key at first. And then increasing the criteria a little bit as they get better. So first they're just in relaxed down positions, and they're just getting the food or the massages or both while the dog is present. Right? The barrier gets closed, you can stop.
Oh, I wish I could shimmy. Yes, I wish I could shimmy.
So recently we had a dog who went through level 1, probably I think last year with me, Sidewalk Cycles level 1. And then she's now back for level 2, where we work outside.
Who's the dog?
And her name is Dixie, and she's a pit mix. And she is doing amazingly well. We've passed by actually dogs that were not in the level 2 class, which sometimes can be tricky for the dogs in level 2, only because they've acclimated to the dogs that we've been walking together.
So what was going on with Dixie when she first started coming?
So she has a little bit of a not great off-leash history with dogs, but on-leash she was like just spinning into a frenzy whenever she would see a dog. So barking. And in level 2, what we've started to do with her is obviously fade the use of treats a little bit. So she's kind of just walking, occasionally checking in, getting praise from her mom, and occasionally getting paid to maintain the eye contact, of course.
Paid with food?
With food, yep. Mm-hmm. And we work on being in closer proximity to other dogs. And actually with her, we're now working on her greeting behavior. Because so some dogs get into trouble when they don't offer what are called appeasement signals in the body language world. So if you see two dogs start to greet, usually what that looks like is head to head for a second, and then head to butt, head to rear. But sometimes with certain dogs, they can get stuck at the facial, at the nose sniff or the face sniff. And if they happen to make eye contact and neither dog offers what's known as an appeasement behavior, that's usually where you'll see an escalation in like either a fight or just ritualized aggression. Yeah, which is aggression without actually biting.
It's interesting that if you watch for it and you see two dogs greeting nicely, a nice greeting is always the same. It's always, a nice greeting is always face to face and then face to butt. Yep. But it's funny because we tend to say that dogs don't do great head to head.
Yeah, but they usually start that way. But the trick is that they don't get stuck at the face. Huh. And unfortunately, when a dog's on a leash, that can be something that they might learn early on, is that they are kind of stuck on the leash. And so they might not, they might actually greet more appropriately off the leash. But on the leash, they may have kind of developed a different routine or a different ritual, and then maybe that could be getting into trouble.
I explain it to people. It's like if you had to learn how to meet people for the first time in a straitjacket.
Yeah.
With someone like holding the end of your straitjacket on top of it.
And having like very little control over controlling the distance.
Yeah. And that's why a lot of dogs have issues on leash. It's because they can't control where they physically are spending that moment.
Right, and talk about classical conditioning. What's their association with seeing another dog?
Is I get yanked.
And they become extremely frustrated and agitated.
And because they can't seek distance, bark, lunge, bite becomes their go-to move.
Yeah. So really the goal of the Sidewalk Psychos course is, instead of a dog instantly seeing or perceiving that a dog is nearby and feeling agitated and frustrated, they actually want to get closer to the dog maybe at some point.
You have helped so many dogs and owners. I can't even. I mean, especially in Sidewalk Psychos. I mean, beyond Sidewalk Psychos too. But
I wish I could add more classes because they're all full.
Yeah. All right.
And no one else. One thing just to mention too. I don't think there are any classes like that in New York. Mm-hmm. And I have people all the time saying, "I'm so thankful that you have this class because I couldn't really." I couldn't take my dog to any other group class. I mean, they just wouldn't be able to learn. And there really is something helpful about the, 8 weeks of being around other dogs and feeling safe and having, occasionally we have a few reactions in the class, but the difference there is that number one, the dog actually doesn't go anywhere. And we help the dog sort of calm down a little bit faster in that controlled setting, because it's not like the dog reacts and then the dog either goes away or comes closer. But just being around dogs for that amount of time and, again, feeling safe really helps change their association in a way that I think sometimes private sessions for dog reactivity can't.
Powerful stuff. Kate, I think you're the greatest, and I'm so, so glad that we found each other.
I'm so happy we're partners.
I'm so happy that we're partners. It's been just such a great partnership. I'm really
It's a great balance.
It is, and it's everything. It's wonderful. Anyway,
well, thank you.
I'm sure you'll be on this podcast again soon, and so thank you.
Thanks.
Our woof shout out today must go to Kate's dog, Disco. Disco was rescued by Kate and her husband Jared from the New York City Animal Care and Control. They fostered him at first, but then fell in love with him and kept him. And you cannot not fall in love with this dog. He is a black and white pit bull with a tremendous underbite and just the sweetest personality. And my little dog, my little Yorkie Poo Amos, who is 13 and does not like all other dogs, loves Disco, and they make out. They full on make out with each other when they see each other, and it is quite adorable. Fun dog fact of the day, did you know that pit bulls are not an actual breed? It's just kind of an umbrella term that refers to dogs who are kind of look like pit bulls, whatever that means. American Pit Bull Terriers get labeled pit bulls, as do American Staffordshire Terriers, as do Bull Terriers, but so do many mixed breed dogs and dogs who just sort of have that squarish head, which is why I think it's so crazy that there are pit bull bans in cities around the country, because it really is banning a dog purely based on their looks.
Wish I could shimmy like my sister Kate.
A huge thank you to those of you who have signed up to give a monthly contribution to this podcast through Anchor, our hosting service. You can do so at anchor.fm/dogs. Really, really appreciate it. You can sign up to give 99 cents, $4.99, or $9.99 a month, and it certainly helps produce this podcast, so really appreciate it. Thank you to Lloyd Davis for his version of Sister Kate, and as always to Alex Chris for producing this podcast. Another way you can support the podcast and also help organize your own life is signing up for SaneBox, which sponsored this episode. You can get a 2-week free trial and $15 off if you go to schoolforthedogs.com/sane. I've used SaneBox for years to organize my email. My latest trick is I don't know if you guys do this, but I do, is I email myself all the time, like things that I need to do. So half of the emails in my inbox are both to and from me. But one thing that you can do in SaneBox that's really helpful is email your future self. So I can send an email through SaneBox really easily right in my Gmail account to myself in a week or in a month for things that I know I'm going to have to deal with but don't have to deal with right away. And that really helps me clear out my inbox, but also make sure that I stay on top of things I need to stay on top of, which is certainly helpful.
Thanks so much for listening. You can support School for the Dogs podcast by telling your friends about it, leaving a review, or shopping in our online store. You can learn more about us and sign up to get lots of free training resources when you visit us online at schoolforthedogs.com.